The first thing I noticed that morning was a man in khaki shorts hammering a "Reserved for HOA" sign into the heart of my pasture. Not on the outskirts, not near the road, but dead center on my property, as if it had always been meant to stand there. My second observation was Melissa Carter, decked out in her trademark floral blazer and oversized sunglasses, perched atop a makeshift stage with a microphone in hand. Her voice boomed across the field. "Welcome to the first annual HOA dog show." I nearly spat out my coffee. A dog show? On my land. I blinked, half convinced this was some heat-stroke-fueled mirage. But no. There they were. Folding chairs, white tents, tables draped with vibrant banners proclaiming "Best in Show" and "Obedience Champion," and dogs everywhere. Fluffy chihuahuas, primped spaniels, and Labradors with coats glossier than my truck's finish. I stepped onto my porch, arms folded, watching as Melissa waved like she was emceeing a grand parade. Her legion of HOA minions buzzed around, assembling agility courses and unfurling red carpets for their pedigreed stars. Then, as if the scene wasn't absurd enough, I spotted a trophy display glittering in the morning light. These people had orchestrated a full-scale tournament on land they didn't own. Taking a deep breath, I marched off my porch and cut straight through their delusional setup. A few HOA members gasped as I approached, as though a feral beast had breached their precious canine kingdom. Melissa, though, was unfazed, a smug grin curling her lips. "Tom, so glad you're here," she chirped, her tone dripping with artificial sweetness. I narrowed my eyes. What in the hell is this? Melissa let out a theatrical laugh and gestured grandly. "Oh, just a little community event to celebrate our wonderful neighborhood dogs. Isn't it delightful?" I glanced at the speaker system they'd rigged up, the catering van parked by my fence, the rows of garish banners, and the growing cluster of HOA folks in visors and khakis. "You're standing on my property." Melissa tilted her head, feigning puzzlement. "Well, technically, this pasture contributes to the community's aesthetic appeal, so it's practically shared space." I stared, waiting for her to crack a smile and admit the joke. "The hell it is. This is private land." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Tom, you're always so literal about these things. We're all neighbors, aren't we? Shouldn't we embrace the spirit of unity?" A woman in a golf cap nodded eagerly beside her. "Yes, Tom. Think of the happiness this brings everyone." I was thinking of the mess their spectacle would leave on my field. I was thinking of the gall it took to stage their pompous dog pageant without even a courtesy call. Most of all, I was thinking I'd had enough of Melissa's nonsense. I stepped closer, voice calm but firm. "You've got 15 minutes to pack up and get off my land." Melissa's smile widened, like a car salesman dodging a refund. "Oh, Tom, don't be so dour. The event's already underway. It'd be impossible to stop now." I inhaled sharply, scanning the yipping dogs and their owners fussing over bow ties on their pampered pets. I could picture it. Tiny claws tearing up my grass, polished loafers stomping the soil, a few hyperhounds marking my fence posts. This wasn't a minor nuisance, it was a takeover. I turned back to Melissa, who was now flipping through a stack of dubious-looking documents. "I have the community bylaws right here," she said, oozing confidence, "and they clearly state." I wasn't listening. My eyes had landed on something far more promising. My flock of herding sheep, idly munching grass on the far side of the pasture. That's when inspiration struck. I didn't need to argue, yell, or call the sheriff. I had a better plan. Melissa wanted a show. She'd get one. I stepped back, my frustration morphing into something more gratifying. "All right," I said, my tone suddenly cooperative. "Go ahead. Have your dog show." Melissa blinked. "Really?" I nodded. "Of course. Enjoy yourselves." A few HOA members clapped, relieved I'd finally embraced their community spirit. Melissa beamed, looking far too smug. I turned and strolled back toward my house, casting a glance at my sheep. They were calm, oblivious, but they were also expertly trained. And if there was one thing they loved more than grazing, it was herding anything that moved. Melissa and her pristine dog show had no clue what was coming. The morning sun bathed the pasture in a golden hue, highlighting the rows of impeccably groomed dogs sitting primly beside their owners. The judges, a trio of overzealous HOA committee members, paraded around, inspecting each canine with exaggerated gravitas. Melissa stood at the center, microphone in hand, looking like she was about to crown a monarch. The event was unfolding just as she'd envisioned, with zero regard for the fact that it was on my land. I leaned against my fence, watching with the quiet amusement of someone about to set off a sparkler. My gaze flicked to my sheep, still grazing peacefully, unaware their day was about to liven up. I gave a low whistle, a distinct pitch they'd been conditioned to recognize. The response wasn't instant. At first, the sheep merely raised their heads, ears twitching toward me. Then, one by one, they began to move, their leisurely pace shifting to a purposeful stride. The herd flowed toward the open pasture like a single, synchronized entity. The first to notice was an older woman with a shrill little dachshund. She gasped as the woolly mass approached. "Oh my, are those sheep?" she asked, her voice wavering between intrigue and alarm. A few heads turned, whispers rippling through the crowd. Melissa, still lost in her self-important spiel, didn't notice until the first wave of sheep infiltrated the competition zone. It started subtly. They mingled with the dogs, sniffing curiously at the coiffed spaniels and haughty terriers. Then chaos erupted. One sheep bumped a beagle, who let out a startled yelp and bolted. That single spark ignited the sheep's instincts. They were herding animals, after all, and now everything in the pasture was fair game. The flock surged forward. A freshly groomed retriever yelped as a zealous sheep chased it in circles. A toy poodle vanished under a tide of wool, re-emerging seconds later, shell-shocked. Melissa shrieked into the microphone. "What is happening? Stop this insanity." I bit back a grin. I wasn't stopping anything. The judges flailed their clipboards, shouting orders no one heeded. The sheep were relentless. Every time a dog tried to flee, the herd adjusted, cutting off escape routes with eerie precision. Even the bulliest dogs, Melissa's earlier boasts, were no match. A mastiff lunged for the fence, only to be tackled mid-leap by two determined sheep, tumbling back into the fray. A prize-winning spaniel, its curls pristine, cowered as three sheep stared it down like a wayward lamb, whimpering in defeat. Owners scrambled, some diving into the madness, others frozen in disbelief. The once orderly dog show morphed into a new contest, one where the sheep held all the cards. Melissa was apoplectic, waving her clipboard and barking commands at the sheep as if they'd bow to HOA rules. "Get back. You're ruining everything." The sheep didn't budge. Instead, one bold ewe took a shine to Melissa herself. With pinpoint accuracy, it lowered its head and charged, nudging her legs just enough to send her sprawling into the dirt. The microphone hit the ground with a squeal, amplifying her outraged cries. Amid the pandemonium, one dog stood out, a scruffy mutt named Rusty. Short-legged and rough-edged, he didn't flee like the others. Instead, he watched the sheep, eyes keen, body taut. Then, as if a switch flipped, he leaped into action. Rusty darted through the chaos, barking with intent, not the frantic yaps of panic, but a deliberate, commanding tone. The sheep paused, then responded. He wove in and out, positioning himself with uncanny skill, guiding the flock rather than resisting it. I straightened, impressed. That dog had instincts, raw, unpolished herding talent. Melissa, now dusty and disheveled, pointed a shaky finger at Rusty. Somebody stop that mongrel. But no one did. The HOA crowd, many of whom had soured on Melissa when their precious purebreds floundered, watched Rusty with awe. "That's incredible," someone murmured. "A natural," another agreed. Even the deputy who'd arrived to check the disturbance paused, nodding appreciatively. "That's a working dog if I ever saw one," he muttered. Rusty kept at it, and within minutes, the anarchy settled. The sheep, once the terror of the event, were now neatly corralled in a circle, managed with expert finesse by the unlikeliest hero. The silence that followed was almost laughable. The primp dogs were spent, their owners frazzled. The judges, clipboards abandoned, stood dumbfounded. Melissa, still seething, staggered to her feet. "This is an outrage. We'll have you fined, Tom. This violates community order." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Violation, ma'am? From what I see, you trespassed on private property, held an unsanctioned event, and lost control of it. I should be fining you." Melissa's face paled. But the bylaws." I smirked, arms crossed. "Barking up the wrong tree, Melissa." One judge, still dazed, cleared his throat. Well, technically, if this is still a competition, he glanced at Rusty, then the sheep, then the weary show dogs. I think we have a winner. The crowd buzzed in agreement. I grinned, kneeling to tousle Rusty's fur. Looks like you just took first place, pal. Melissa let out a guttural screech, but it was swallowed by applause. The HOA members, no longer under her sway, cheered. Some even whistled. The deputy chuckled. I don't usually catch these community shindigs, but this one was worth it. I tipped my hat. Glad you liked the show. As the crowd thinned out, dragging their bedraggled dogs away, Melissa stormed off to her SUV, vowing retribution. I wasn't fazed. She'd lost, and so had her reign. The pasture was a wreck, but it was worth it. I scratched Rusty's ears as the sheep ambled back to grazing, as if nothing had happened. Well, Rusty, I said, stretching with a satisfied sigh. Looks like we just dethroned Melissa's tyranny. Rusty barked happily, as if he understood. I headed back to my porch, tipping my hat as the sun sank lower. Melissa would brood over this for weeks, maybe months, plotting her next power grab. But for now, peace was mine again. Next time she eyed my land for her absurd schemes, she'd think twice. And if she didn't, I still had plenty of sheep.